Thank you for being here. And first, I want to thank Michelle and Damon of the library staff for setting this up for me. I also want to thank Mary Philpott for getting me into doing this several years ago when she first encouraged me to show my pictures. And I want to thank my wife, Marty, who is, in addition to being my partner in life, is my partner in birding. And many of the birds that are on the walls here, she saw first. I just took the pictures. She saw them. And thanks also to CTSB for being here. So why do I start with a picture of a Baltimore Oriole? So can you see it now, everybody? Can you hear me now? Okay. So why do I start with a photo of a Baltimore Oriole? Shouldn't it be south of here, like maybe in Baltimore? They do migrate in the spring. They're one of many birds that come here, that spend their winters far south of here. They come here in the spring to breed, and they come here. Most of these birds that come here because we have so many insects. So every time you bat a mosquito away, think of the fact that the birds are here for that very reason. Like many birds, the Oriole does spend the winter in the southeastern states, but it does come here, and it spends, like its cousin, the orchard Oriole, as well as here. And warbirds and other birds that go as far south as South America will come to New England and the rest of northeastern United States to breed. So here in Lee, it's possible to see and hear about 200 species of birds during the year. We have, roughly in the Berkshires, on most years you'll get about 200 birds. The list, I think, is 300 birds, right, Jonathan? The actual total list. That includes a lot of rare birds that only come here every once in a while. But some birds are just here in the summertime. But a lot of other birds are here year-round, and I have both migrants and year-round birds in these photos. Now, many people know the familiar birds like the American robin, the crow, the cardinal, but many people don't know these other birds that are here, and that's one of the reasons for having this show, is so you can see birds that are here. I could guarantee you I took these pictures here, so they are around. We're into August, which is a really tough time for birders because the birds are not very active now. They're also not singing very much because they don't need to sing to protect their nests or to get mates. But they are here, and there actually are more birds here than probably any other time of year because we have all these young birds that were hatched this summer, and they're still around. Their parents are starting to leave in some cases, and the young ones will start to leave after them as well. So they'll be going, but we still have lots of other birds going still. So let's get started with the photos. I have a couple pages that I'm going to show you with written stuff, so you don't have to listen to me, and then the rest of them is all pictures. And I'll try to keep it brief with each photo. And Marty's back there to give me a heads up if I go talk too long, which I tend to do. I need to talk to the mic? Okay. So let me see if I get this going here. Okay. And this is the female Baltimore Oriole. And this one's obviously had a feeder right in our front yard. So these are my pages of writing. Everybody got this? Okay. Okay, on to birds. So this is another one of our really spectacular birds, the indigo bunting, which spends its winter in Florida and the Caribbean, Mexico, comes here in the summertime. The female is very brown, but the male was really spectacular. And you usually see them high in treetops, but this one happened to come to our feeders, was scrounging around on the ground underneath our feeders a couple winters ago. And the next several slides have warblers, which are the really colorful songbirds that come here from as far away as South America. The most common warbler we have here in the summertime is the yellow warbler, and it's the easiest one to see because it's a very bright yellow. You see a little bit of yellow floating around in the trees and moving really rapidly. That's a yellow warbler, most likely. This is the female, and this is the male, and you can tell the male is a little bit has a little brighter streaks, red streaks on his chest. Oh, I meant to say at the beginning, we'll have time for questions afterwards, but if anybody has a question as we go along, please shout out or raise your hand and I'll try to answer it. I am not an expert, but I'll try to answer your question. The common yellowthroat is another one of our more common warblers. The male is a really spectacular little bird with his Lone Ranger mask and his yellow throat. They have a brown back, but they're really beautiful little birds. We call them witchetties because their song sounds like witchetty, witchetty, witchetty. Also, you could also say it as mayonnaise, 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 but you know, to each his own. Excuse me. Another one of my favorite little warblers is the black-throated blue, which is not as common here, but it's not as easy to see, but I really love them. And this one showed up at our feeders actually a few years ago, and I couldn't resist using his picture. Sorry, I've got something sick in my throat. The pine warbler is one of the first warblers to show up here in the spring, and it stays here during the summertime. I actually heard one just the other day. They do a really rapid trill from the tops of pine trees, actually, mostly. But they breed here, and they'll be gone, you know, fairly soon. The palm warbler is another one of the ones that is here very early. They do go farther north to breed for the most part. The warbling vireo is one of two birds called vireos, which are other insectivores. In other words, they live on insects. And this one is called the warbling vireo because it actually warbles. It kind of sounds like a warbler. You can actually think it sounds a little bit like a. It can trick you into thinking it's actually a Baltimore Oriole. Well, thank you. So this vireo, the red-eyed vireo, is one of our talkers. It talks all day long, and it sings a song that says, "Here I am, where are you? Here I am, where are you? Here I am, where are you?" Some graduate student in Georgia one time had counted the number of times it sang during the day and counted 20,000 songs in one day. Can you imagine that? And they're really hard to see. They're usually up in the tops of trees or in the dense foliage, and you can spend quite a bit of time trying to find the bird that's talking to you and never see it. But this one was fortunately right in front of me, so I was able to take a picture of him. And you can see the bright red eye.
What kind of berries were those?
I don't know those berries. I don't. I'm not very good on berries. So the American goldfinch, this is a male goldfinch early in the spring. This is in April. He hasn't yet gotten all of his bright yellow that he'll have a little bit later on. Goldfinches are among the birds. Goldfinches and waxwings are actually breeding now. They breed in July and August. So they're later than most other birds that breed in May and June. I just like this photo. And more finches, purple finches are local birds. They actually originated here, unlike house finches, which originated on the west coast and migrated here. This is the female. And this is the male who looks like he's been dipped in a jar of raspberry sauce. Grosbeaks are so named because they have a very big beak. And the female, I think, is a really gorgeous bird. But her husband, the male, is really spectacular. And you can see why he's called rose-breasted. They're also known as cutthroats, which is not quite as nice a name, but they also sing really beautifully. And the standard line about the grosbeaks is that they sing like a robin that's had voice lessons at the Metropolitan Opera. They're really beautiful singers. The eastern kingbird is the largest of our flycatchers, and it's here in the summertime. And you can tell them from other flycatchers and most other birds actually, it has a white band at the tip of its tail, which kind of shows in this picture, right down here. They have a really high-pitched sound. It's really hard to hear, especially unless I turn my hearing aids all the way up, I can't hear them. The eastern phoebe is the first of the flycatchers to arrive here and usually the last to leave. It's a beautiful little bird. I think although the field guides all describe them as drab, I think that's unfair to the phoebe, which I think is a really pretty little bird. It does say its own name, Phoebe, but in a very scratchy voice, which I think sounds like squeezy, squeezy. But it's a neat little bird. And another bird that says its own name is the eastern wood pewee. It says pewee, pewee. There's usually an O in there somewhere, but. And the willow flycatcher is one of two flycatchers, the other being the alder, that look exactly alike. And really, experts may be able to tell them apart, but the only way you can really tell them apart is by their sound. The alder flycatcher has a little song that says has been translated as free beer. It's a very popular sound. The willow flycatcher says Fitzview or something like that. It goes down. So if you hear an upward one, that's a willow. If you hear a downward, or it's an alder. If you hear a downward one, it's an alder. A willow. See, it's confusing. Blue-gray gnatcatcher is another flycatcher that's just really pretty. It's got this really bright eye ring, white eye ring. The dark-eyed junco is it's not a flycatcher, but it's one of it's a sparrow actually, and this junco is the original snowbird. But in the opposite meaning of the way people use that word, the junco, it loves cold weather. And it's actually, the juncos now are mostly up in Mount Greylock, October Mountain, places like that. They will come down here in the wintertime, late fall and winter, and they'll be with us all winter. Then they leave again when it gets hot. They're like me, they don't like hot weather. You see them at your feeders. And speaking of birds that you'll see at your feeders, the next section are sparrows. And I'm showing a whole bunch of sparrows to show you that sparrows are not all drab brown birds. They're all one of the terms that birders use is LBJ, little brown job, which indicate that all little brown birds look the same. Well, they don't. And chipping sparrow being a great case of a bird that's, a very distinctive, very beautiful little bird. It's got their little russet cap, white breast. This is your classic song sparrow. Those of you who have feeders have seen lots of song sparrows. And the Lincoln sparrow is one of the prettiest sparrows. It has a really fine.
Amen.
I'm sorry?
Amen.
Yes. White-crowned sparrow is not as common here as some of the other sparrows, but it still is here, and we do see them fairly often. And one of our winter sparrows is the white-throated sparrow. You can tell it's wintertime because it's in front of a bank of snow on Meadow Street. And And the general line about white-throated sparrows is if you see one, there are probably 20 more hanging around, because they do tend to fly in flocks. So I guess this is one of my most popular pictures here, and that is we've all seen robins hopping around in our yards looking for worms, but you almost never see what happens when they grab one. Well, this is what they do. It was down the hatch pretty quick, I can tell you that. I only got the one picture of the worm actually squirming around. But robins are very common, I would say, and year-round. Although you see, the standard line is that robins disappear in the wintertime, but that's not really true. They are here. Maybe they're more in the woods than they'll be out in public, but they are here. So now we come to this is my personal very favorite bird, the chickadee, which is a year-round bird here. We tend to see them and hear them more in the wintertime than we do in the summer, but they are here. They're a really darling little bird. They're really feisty little birds. They're not deterred by cold weather. They're not deterred by hawks and other predators. They live their own life, and it's fun to see them. Another bird that is not deterred by anything is a blue jay. And I think everybody knows the call of a blue jay, the really raucous call. Blue jays also imitate other birds, including hawks. Every once in a while when you're out, a birder will think he's hearing a red-tailed hawk, and in fact it's a blue jay somewhere who's imitating a hawk. They can be very realistic.
They eat bees too, don't they?
I'm sorry?
Do they eat bees?
I don't know. Jonathan, do you know if they eat bees? I'm not sure. Yeah. Gray catbird is another bird that I think is a really beautiful bird, despite the fact that it's only two colors, gray and black. It's got a black cap. There's a little bit of russet under its tail, which is really hard to see. But it's one of my favorite birds, and they do make a meow kind of like a cat. They also chatter like crazy. And they're one of the first birds to wake you up in the morning, at least at our house. They'll start fairly early in the summertime. The bobolink. The bobolink is a blackbird, and it's a grassland nester. In other words, it nests in big, open, wide expanses of grassland. Now, grassland's really hard to find these days, right? Because we've either putting shopping malls or mowed it down or put in golf courses. There is one really nice piece of grassland at Edith Wharton Park next to Laurel Lake where they have been breeding for years and years and years. This year, not many were around. Actually, I've seen very few there. I saw some more this morning at a place in Great Barrington, but they have been there most of the years. And I took this picture a couple years ago. This was in the middle of the summer, and this male was already starting. The males lose their black plumage and come to look like females later on in the year. And you can see he's got a little bit of gold under his throat. That's the beginning of his molting. And I believe this is a juvenile. This was taken in August of that year. The females and the juveniles look very similar. So the Carolina wren, the Cherokees apparently have a name for the Carolina wren, which is this long, and which describes it as a little brown bird that talks very loud. And anybody who has a Carolina wren under their window, their bedroom window, can tell you that. Our Carolina wren's been talking about around 5 o'clock in the morning. So it's impossible to stay awake no matter what. If you have the fans going or air conditioning or whatever, you still hear the Carolina wren. They're here year round. They're a beautiful little bird. They are very loud. Cedar waxwing is another one of my very favorite birds, and it gets the name waxwing from the little red tips on its wing feathers. And they also can be here year round. They are frugivores. They eat fruit, And if you have a tree, like a crabapple tree, with crab apples that last through the winter or a good part of the winter, they'll go for those. Occasionally you'll see them acting like they're a little drunk. That's because they've eaten crab apples that have gotten a little long in the tooth. I love the tuft on its back of his head. And this is a juvenile cedar waxwing, and it's got the start of the mask, the black mask, and just a little bit of the yellow at the tip of the tail. But it's a darling little bird. So I think just about everybody knows what a bluebird is. The eastern bluebirds are one of our most common and most famous birds. This is the female who has a little treat for its young. This was taken out on Hopbook on Meadow Street. And this is the male, taken in our front yard just last spring. So another one of our really famous birds is the cardinal. The male, I mean, what can you say about a male cardinal? It's just a really spectacular bird. Even though they're very common, they're incredibly beautiful. And the female, I think, is just as beautiful as the male cardinal. One of the few species where you can really say that for sure. But she doesn't get as much respect as the male does because he's so spectacular, but the female is just more subtly beautiful. They're also really hard to photograph. I've taken hundreds of pictures of female cardinals. I've taken very few ones that I'm really happy with. They don't pose. The males tend to pose. They know they're spectacular, so they like to be, but the females don't. Blackbirds, yes.
So are they? I associate them more with suburban areas. I've never seen them in the forest.
You don't see them in the forest. I mean, I don't see them in the forest. No. No. Yeah, they live with people quite a bit. They live around houses. I mean, I'm sure they are in the forest, but I've never seen them in the forest. You talk about the cardinals, right? Yeah. So this is a female red-winged blackbird. It is not a sparrow. It looks a lot like a sparrow, but it just happens to be a female. And they are actually really neat birds. They don't talk so much, but they do not have a beautiful song. Neither do the males. But the males can be pretty spectacular. The tufted titmouse is another one of my very favorite birds, although my friend Ben Nickley, who's a bird bander, absolutely hates them because they bite. They really bite. Every time he catches a titmouse, he makes one of his assistants handle it. So no, that's just a joke. But he said he's been bitten more times by titmice, and chickadees bite too, but the titmice are the worst. They're really feisty birds. The American woodcock. Anybody here who's a hunter knows the woodcocks. They're a game bird. They're not stocked like some other birds, at least that I know of. But they're hard to see unless you happen to be in the right place at the right time. And Marty and I were driving down Meadow Street one day, and we saw this brown thing over by the side of the road, so we stopped and pulled over, and sure enough, it was a woodcock. We just sat there. They're not the brightest kids on the block, and he just sat there. I got right up next to him and took lots of photographs of him, and then eventually he flew off when a very big and loud truck came by. So the black vulture, I think most people know what a turkey vulture is. Most people think they're called buzzards in much of the United States. Kind of ugly red face. We think of it as an ugly red face. Well, the black vulture has a black face, and it's mostly a southern bird. You see them by the dozens or hundreds in Florida and other southeastern states. They are now coming farther north. And there's actually a flock in Great Barrington of 15 or 20. Jonathan, you think so? More than that? I saw a whole bunch flying by when I drove by through Great Barrington this morning, but for some reason Great Barrington they've been really attracted to downtown Great Barrington. Whether they like the buskers in the summer or whatever, I don't know, but they love it there. Everybody knows a turkey. Usually you know from the grocery store, but this is a wild turkey. And Meadow Street's a great place to see wild turkeys. High Lawn Farms is another place we often see wild turkeys. So if you're driving on Route 7 or on Summer Street, check out the fields or on Meadow Street. So why is a sandhill crane here? Well, there has been a breeding pair of sandhill cranes in the south and undisclosed location in the southern part of the county. And 2 years ago, Jonathan Pierce, who's the best birder in the county and who's back here, called me up one day and said there's a sandhill crane over at High Lawn Farm. So I ran over and took these photos. It was in breeding plumage, really beautiful birds. We've seen, Marty and I have seen sandhill cranes by the tens of thousands in New Mexico in the winter when they're not in breeding plumage. They're very gray, but when they're really red and beautiful like this, they're spectacular birds. And they do come here, not very often, but they do come here. So we only have one hummingbird here in the Northeast. It's the ruby throat. Couple other hummingbirds occasionally, rarely come here, but this is our standard hummingbird. This is the male, see with his very red throat. So what happens when a hummingbird and a bee arrive at the feeder at the same time? This happens. They scare each other off. I'm not sure. I wasn't sure who actually got there first, but I think they got there about the same time. And the bee obviously was there, and he took off, and then the hummingbird jumped up, flittered around for a little bit, and then he landed back down again, or she did, landed back down again.
I think the bee wins more often.
I'm sorry?
I think the bee wins more often.
The bee often wins. Yeah, the birds are terrified of the bees for justifiable reasons. So we have two kinds of nuthatches here. And nuthatches are birds that go down the tree trunks looking for little insects. They go head first straight down. And the one that you see less often is the red-breasted nuthatch. It's really beautiful. It's got just a little bit of a red wash on its belly. And they're the ones I try all winter long to get photographs of, and they're not easy to photograph. And the other one is the white-breasted, which is more common, and a little bit bigger. And both of them come to feeders, actually. So those of you who have feeders in the winter have probably seen both of these. And they do go head first down the trees. You always wonder why the blood doesn't rush to the head and make them daffy, but they somehow manage to do it. But going up the tree is this bird, brown creeper, and it's so named because it's very brown. It matches the tree trunk. They're really hard to see, and they creep up the tree. What they do is they creep up a tree, and then they jump down to the next tree, and they creep up that tree. Then they jump down and creep up that tree. And it's really fun to watch them, but they're hard to see, and they're really hard to photograph. I can tell you, and we almost always see them in the wintertime. And so whenever I see one that I can take good pictures of, I'm always excited. I think they're actually beautiful birds, even though they're fairly plain. So on to woodpeckers. So I want you to look at the size of the bill on this bird, the downy woodpecker. This is a male downy woodpecker, which is the smallest of our woodpeckers. Very common woodpecker. You'll see it all winter long if you have feeders, especially if you have suet feeders. The next one here is a hairy woodpecker. Look at the size of the bill relative to the head. That's really the only way you can tell the two of them apart for most people. The hairy is bigger, but if you see it in isolation, you can't really tell it's bigger than the other bird. But you can see that its bill is basically about half the size, half the length of its head, width of its head. And this is a female red-bellied woodpecker, which does not have a red belly, really. Sometimes they have a little bit of a red wash to their belly, which is why they have that name. But they're one of our more common woodpeckers. They're bigger than either the hairy or the downy. Yes, Judy?
So I see so many red-bellied woodpeckers at my feeder, but I've never seen a female. Never seen the white.
Well, they have it's the head, the amount of red on the head is the difference. The male has the red all the way up his head, and the female has the red only halfway up his head. The belly is not really the determining factor. It's the amount of red on the head that tells the difference. So you probably have seen a female and a male. This is the biggest of our woodpeckers. This is woody woodpecker, the pileated. And they make the hysterical laugh. I call it a maniacal laugh when you hear them in the woods. The belted kingfisher is, it's a little bit bigger than a robin, maybe about half again the size of a robin, but it's a pretty good fisher person. And it catches small fish in the lakes and rivers. I saw this one at the Housatonic River, where they like to fish. They fish at, you see them often at Laurel Lake, especially on the causeway at Laurel Lake. And one other distinctive feature about kingfishers is that they are one of the few species where the female has more color than the male. That the russet on her belly there, the male does not have that. He's very plain and bland. The female is much more colorful. Why that is, I have no idea, but that's one of the features of the belted kingfisher. And they, when you see them, often they make a rattle call. Sounds like a kid's rattle. But you also often see them hovering, helicoptering like a helicopter over water. And then they make a sudden plunge into the water. Couple birds that are called shorebirds, and which is a kind of a misleading term because they're here. We're not at a shore that I know of, unless you want to call Laurel Lake, the beach at Laurel Lake, a shore. But the solitary sandpiper and the next one, the killdeer, you'll see at along riverbanks, in mud flats, in marshes. But they're here episodically. You don't see them all year long, or even very regularly. But we've seen quite a few solitary sandpipers the last 3 or 4 weeks, I think. I know I've seen them the last month or so. And they're distinctive because they have a very white, bright white eye ring.
Are they the ones that do a lot of bobbing?
No, that's the spotted. The spotted one does a lot of bobbing. And the killdeer is, I think, a really beautiful bird. It's got 2 black bands under its throat or belly.
John, do you ever record any of these birds?
I occasionally do, yeah. I haven't for this presentation, but. So green herons. I probably take more pictures of green herons than all other species of birds combined during the summer. And mostly that's because I spend a lot of time at 2 marshes in Stockbridge that are part of the Concobat Bog system, the marsh on Wallace Road and the marsh on Bean Hill Road, where the green herons breed. And this summer they actually, I've seen at Wallace Road marsh, I've seen 4 baby green herons, which is really exciting to me. They're really lovely little birds. This is a young green heron that I saw at Laurel Lake several years ago. I've seen very few green herons at Laurel Lake at the marsh area. They breed in marshy areas, so they won't breed on the lake side. They breed on the side to the mount side of the causeway at Laurel Lake. But but they're really a spectacular little bird. They're about the size of a crow. And they're called green heron even though they're not very green. The adults are blue in the back. They have kind of a reddish front. Great blue heron, I think a lot of people are familiar with. A lot of people think these are cranes. They're not actually cranes, they're herons. And this is a younger heron, and 4 years ago, and I think that's the year that we saw a lot of herons at Laurel Lake. I remember one day seeing 7 at one time. It was a kind of an amazing thing. Why were all these herons here in that one day? Fishing must have been really good that day. But this one caught, obviously, a nice fish. He hasn't downed it yet, but he got it down, I can tell you that. They can get amazingly huge fish down their throats. We saw one in upstate New York a couple months ago that got a fish that I thought that for sure the heron was going to croak on it, but he got it down and seemed just fine. Great egrets also come to the Berkshires, and they come to Lee. They're not as common as the herons, but we do see them every once in a while. And this one year, there were 2 of them that hung out for a pretty long time, mostly at Woods Pond and along the river in Lee. So the wood duck is our most beautiful duck, especially the male is really spectacular. He's got that bouffant hairdo. The female is actually really pretty too. She has a little white comma around her eye. And this was a rare opportunity to get a picture of the 2 of them together in a clear setting. Buffleheads are among my favorite little ducks, and they're really little ducks. We see them at the lake, usually in the early spring, late winter, early spring, and they're very comical little birds. They just run along the water and seem to have a good time. The female on the left and the male on the right. And the pintail, I think, is the most elegant looking duck. It's got a long neck, long arching neck, that white that goes up the side, back of the head, and a little tail that looks like a pin. Pied-billed grebes I love pied-billed grebes, and this bird is not in full breeding plumage. They're really spectacular when they are, but this one was on a rainy day in October, I guess 5 years ago. They're really little ducks, and they can go underwater, and they can seem to stay underwater for a really long period of time. You wonder how a little tiny duck that can stay under for so long, but they do. And scalps, we have both lesser scalps and greater scalps, and birders are driven crazy by trying to distinguish between the 2 of them, and some people don't care, but they're really neat little ducks. And the male is the one dressed in black, the female is dressed in brown. Hooded merganser is another really beautiful little duck, especially the male in particular. Although the female is really a pretty little duck too, but that white at the back of the head, which can be either it can be a really narrow band of white, or as in this case, when he puffs it all out, it looks like he's been blow drying it. Combined with the yellow eyes. So most everybody knows mallards. This is the female. Now we have a group exercise that this next picture is going to show. I want everybody to imitate this duck. Okay? Are we all ready? Anybody who can do this wins a grand prize. I'm not sure what that prize will be, but an hand autographed picture, copy of this picture. This duck was doing a lot of preening one morning at Laurel Lake, and I love to take pictures. A lot of photographers don't like to take pictures of birds when they're preening because they think it's boring. I don't know, but I think it's really among the most fascinating things they do. So I take lots of photos of them when they're preening, and fortunately I got this photo of him with his head all the way back, and how he did that is just beyond belief. But I did not make this picture up. This is not artificial intelligence at all. So swans, we basically have one swan that's here pretty regularly, the mute swan. And this is this one was born that spring. Picture was taken in January, probably born the previous spring or summer. And you can tell because its beak is kind of a pale pinky as opposed to a brighter orange red that they become when they're adults, full adults. Everybody knows what a Canada goose looks like, I think, so I decided to use a picture of them in flight. And they're at Laurel Lake in the dozens or the hundreds, sometimes many hundreds in the wintertime. And another goose that occasionally shows up in the Berkshires is a snow goose. You can see snow goose in the hundreds, many hundreds, just north of here in Vermont. In Middlebury, there's a really wonderful reserve called Dead Creek where they show up. Well, we've seen them in the hundreds. And you can see them in the thousands in Nebraska and New Mexico and other places. And we get them by the 1s and 2s and 3s and sometimes 4s and 5s, but very few of them here. This goose hung around Laurel Lake for a couple weeks or so, 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago, and I'm sure it had a broken wing, and I'm sure it became eagle food later on. It couldn't fly. How it got there, I have no idea. It didn't. I tried to ask it, and it wouldn't answer any questions. But it was a beautiful bird. But he was actually hanging around with a mute swan. So onto some hawks. Cooper's hawk is our smallest hawk, about the size of a crow. It's a fierce predator. Anybody who has bird feeders has seen a Cooper's hawk fly through the feeders at 1,000,000 miles an hour and maybe take out a chickadee or something. The red tail is our most common hawk, the largest of our regular hawks. This one was just in front of our house. The osprey is interesting story. The osprey, we almost lost the osprey, 6 or 7 decades ago to DDT. But since we banned DDT in the early 60s, it's made a comeback. There are now 3 active nests in the Berkshires, and I know the next one here. I apologize for the image quality of this picture, but I took this last Friday. This is an osprey nest in Lee on the LB Company property, which you can see from the athletic field. And this osprey, this is the adult, probably the female, feeding 3 chicks. I was really excited to see the 3 because I'd seen one before several times, but I hadn't seen all 3. But then on Friday we saw all 3. It was really neat. And there's another one there's one in Lenox that I don't think actually succeeded in producing a pair this year, or any chicks this year. And there's another one, believe it or not, at the Berkshire Mall. On a lamp post at the Berkshire Mall, of all places. This is the broadwing hawk, which is another fairly common hawk here. They will be leaving. They're a migrant, and they will be leaving here pretty soon. And sometimes they'll fly over in the dozens or the hundreds. Barred owl. This is not a great photo, but I wanted to include at least one owl. This is the only owl photo I've ever taken in the town of Lee. And this is by total accident. Marty and I were talking to friends on West Road and near our house. And Marty looked over and she said, "There's an owl over there." So I jumped out of the car and sure enough, managed to get this photo. Barred owl is one of our more common owls. You usually hear it rather than see it. And its song is, "Who cooks, who cooks, who cooks for you?" So down to the end here, and this is kind of a sad one here. In showing this picture, there's been an eagle's nest at Laurel Lake for many, many years. I understand from a friend at the State Fish and Wildlife Agency that they have not produced an active chick since 2014. But the parents do go and they're on the nest every year. They come on Thanksgiving weekend to guard the nest. They come back and they guard the nest all through December, early January. Then they start acting like they are incubating eggs, in late January, early February. And they're there. They're there every day. And why they are not able to produce a chick, I have no idea. I mean, I can speculate, but I just don't know. But they're there. This winter they were not there as much. So I think maybe they were giving up. I don't know. I hope not, but it's interesting. We do have this eagle's nest that in the past was successful. And this could easily be, well, it's probably the offspring of some other eagle's nest somewhere else, but this is it's a subadult, really. It doesn't have the totally white head. So that's it. I used this quote in a presentation a couple years ago, but I liked it so much and it's so appropriate to this particular presentation I thought I'd use it again. What's up? So the pictures are on the walls, and many of them are hidden by the screen here, which we'll pull up. But there are exactly 50 photos here. They will be up all this month, and so I encourage you to come back and take a look or look at them now while you're here. And thank you. So any questions? Yes?
John, you were able to show us up close a lot of bird claws.
Yeah.
Most of them have 3 fingers or whatever you call them.
No, they all have different numbers. It depends on the species of bird. And some of them have ones going back, some don't.
Does it depend on the size of the bird?
No, it doesn't necessarily depend on the size of the bird. It just depends on what they need to, where they need to hang out.
How long does it take more species or fewer species as the years are going by?
You mean numbers of species?
Yeah.
I can't really answer that question. I mean, we do. I personally see more species because I'm more aware of what I'm looking for. I don't think we've had a diminishment in numbers of species. We've had diminishment in numbers of birds. There was a study which I talk about in one of my handouts here. There was a study in 2019 that North America has lost 3 billion birds. The population is down by 3 billion birds. That doesn't mean 3 billion individual birds died, but the overall population is down by that. And that's because of all the reasons you can think of, environmental destruction, habitat loss, climate change, you name it. But the number of species, interesting, the number of species here in Berkshire County actually keeps going up. And a classic case is we have a breeding pair, or 2 breeding pairs of purple martins over in Stockbridge by Tanglewood. And purple martins had never nested in Berkshire County. But they're there, and I think the birds have all fledged, right, Jonathan? And we saw 3 yesterday morning, 3 of the babies yesterday morning. So that's another species that was never in Berkshire County. Why did they show up this year? They didn't answer any questions. But will they come back next year? That's the real question. Will they decide they like it here? Did they like the music of Tanglewood across the street? Who knows?
How long does it usually take you to get one of these shots in the wild?
I'm sorry, how much?
How long does it take to get a picture of a bird in the wild? Like, do you sit and camp out, or how do you do it?
Well, it depends. I mean, some of these are you sit and camp out. Most of them are a result of happenstance. You happen to be in the right place at the right time. And that's, to take pictures of any wild animal, you can't count on, when you're taking pictures of feeders, that's one thing. Because birds are going to come to your feeders, and like most bird photographers, I try to take pictures that make it look like the bird is not at a feeder. He's doing something other than that. But when you like the bluebird here, the male bluebird, he was on the top of a feeder pole. But many of these were just the result of happenstance. I happened to be at the right place at the right time, and the bird showed up. And sometimes, yeah, it is. You sit there and you wait. Or, well, the bobolink is a perfect example of a bird where I would go. I didn't do it this year, but in previous summers when there were so many bobolinks, I went to Laurel Lake. I went to Edith Wharton Park every day. Like 5 or 6 days a week, and would walk around the whole length of Edith Wharton Park looking for bobolinks and counting bobolinks. And, I got good pictures because I was there every single day. If I'd just gone once or twice, I probably wouldn't have gotten anywhere near as many good pictures.
Do you ever try to call birds in?
I do not, no. And personally, I think that's not ethical. And there are people who do that. Who you can play on your phone. I have apps that have tons of bird calls on them, but I just don't do that. And most ethical birders and bird photographers will not do that.
For what reason?
I'm sorry?
For what reason?
Well, because it interrupts the bird's life. You never know what's going to happen to them when they've responded to a call. They could fly into a car or something like that. You're interrupting their normal daily activities. And I just don't think I should do that. I think I try to be as inconspicuous to the birds as possible. When you're standing there holding a big camera with a big long lens, you're not inconspicuous, that's for sure. But I try to do it in a way that's not, they don't see as being threatening, and isn't threatening to them. So.
Do anybody put feeders out in the wild? Not deep into the wild, but...
Oh, sure. People do that.
Yeah.
Just like people do it for bears and deer and other things. Yes, John?
Yes. Do you have a bird that you haven't taken a photo of that you really would like to take a photo of?
You mean here or anywhere?
Anywhere.
Oh, there are a billion ones. A perfect example is Marty and I went to Texas this spring to see whooping cranes. I had never seen a whooping crane. I'd never seen one, let alone photographed one. And we went to Aransas National Wildlife Refuge on the coast, and we got to see whooping cranes right away. And I took some photos, which I'm really happy about. So we do travel quite a bit, and so I take a lot of pictures of other places. So yeah, there are lots of birds I'd love to photograph that I haven't. There are lots of birds I'd also like to take better pictures of than I have. I have a long list of those. Yes, John.
Are there any species of birds that we have where the female call is the same as the male call?
Well, there aren't too many, but the question was whether female bird calls are the same. It can be the same as male.
For a phoebe in the spring, we use.
Yeah, you have no idea. You have no idea. I assume they are the same. But for ones that we know there's a difference, like the cardinal, for example. We were at Parker River National Wildlife Refuge a couple years ago, and I was standing there, and I heard a cardinal doing the one of the main cardinal songs, and I thought, that's coming from a female. I was standing right in front of it, and I wasn't smart enough to get my video on, but I took lots of photographs of this female cardinal singing like a male. She was singing exactly like a male, and there are a lot of female ornithologists in recent years have been studying female bird call, and realizing that a lot of female birds do sing. The assumption that female birds don't sing at all is a myth. In some species they don't, but in many species they do, or they don't sing the same call or as sophisticated a call. They do sing some of the song. Males need to sing to attract the mate and to defend the territory. That's why males tend to have neater calls.
Yes. I just wondered how many months a year do you put
We put them out not very long, but she asked how many months a year we put feeders out at our home. We put them out for only a short period of time, basically because of bears. We get a lot of bears at our house. And so we put them out basically after Thanksgiving through, February, early March. And we're really vigilant about trying to bring them in. We bring them in every night. And still, that's not a guarantee that the bears are not going to be there and get the feeders. We brought them in really early this year.
Use a Nikon or a Canon?
Olympus. That's what brand I use. I use Olympus. Because it's a very light camera and I can carry it around all day long. It's very important for me. Yes?
You probably know about this, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to mention it about the, I think Mass Audubon is spearheading this, that we're trying to pass a law in Massachusetts to ban the SGARs, the second generation anticoagulant rodenticides,
That's
is what
right.
it stands for, which are all those black boxes you see around restaurants, schools, hospitals, just about anywhere, supermarkets. And they're baited with poison that is an anticoagulant. And so when the mouse or rat leaves this bait box and a hawk or owl, osprey, eagle eats it, it builds up in their system. And eventually it kills them because they bleed out internally.
Yeah.
And so, and also their offspring.
Yeah.
They're being fed these poisoned mice and rats, so they're trying to pass a law to ban that in Massachusetts. Several states have done that already. And so if you hear anything about it, or if you see those black boxes and you want to mention it to the manager or the restaurant owner, because there are alternatives. They don't have to use them, but the rodent control companies like it because it's effective.
And cheap.
It's cheap and effective.
It's cheap and effective for them
all
to
these
use.
beautiful photos of the raptors, we lose so many of them, and most of them you don't even know about because they die somewhere else.
Yeah, there was one study by Tufts a couple of years ago that said that something like 80% of the red-tailed hawks that they did blood samples on had some residue of these pesticides in them. 80%, which is a huge, when you stop to think about it. Yeah, we do a lot of things that have these second and third and fourth order consequences we don't really think about until it's too late. And the raptors are being decimated. Once again, we got rid of DDT, and it took a huge campaign to get rid of it. But now we're back in it again.
Not to mention what McDonald's hamburgers are doing to us.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.